Hello, my name's Alpha Tanutua, and I am going to be talking about the 6 courses and the 2 work placements that I have done throughout the first and second year of my time being at SAE as a film production student. For my first course, which is SP601, is about a movie called Rashomon. What I remember from this project is that we study a movie called Rashomon, which includes a very fascinating plot that explores the culprits that could potentially be the murder of the young woman. It has a very philosophical perspective to it all. The more you watch certain scenes in the film, the more complex and confusing it becomes for the viewer to figure out who did the killing. I couldn't really come up with any killers in mind. Instead, I concluded that the mix of different stories tend to become true or false depending on the reasons, either for their safety or others. This got me thinking very critically about the film and its overall state. Even though I wasn't able to come up with a proper answer on who or why they did it, even after watching the movie a few times, I was still getting conflicted on whether or not the person that I initially thought was the one. I ended up with a blank slate. At some point, I realized maybe it wasn't just one person that was involved, but the ulterior motives just never added up. I didn't really know who to choose, which is also one of the reasons why I had a problem with reviewing this film, because I was just so hesitant and I just really didn't trust whether my judgment was this person or the other. I just pretty much doubted every single choice that was pretty much given to me. So I came up with a conclusion that included many different outcomes. Maybe it could be multiple people that planned this execution. We will never know. I will never know, and you will never know. But that is also one of the great things about reviewing this movie, because for me overall, after having a few watches for this movie, I took into consideration that maybe everyone that has like their own perspective and their own opinion about who did what and the reason why this should be the one suspected and, being sent to jail or whatever gruesome things they will have to endure. I think that's just a nice social thing overall. CC600 Spanish flu. For this project, Martina Yu filmed her parents. For a documentary-based film, we used COVID-19 and the lockdown as our questionnaires. During the history part of the assignment, we used the Spanish flu. During the level 4 and 3 lockdown, we made sure to book as many times throughout the week in order to spend as much time on the project as possible. We both managed to work on the post-production at our best. We went through this assignment while thinking of all sorts of similarities the coronavirus has with the Spanish flu as we searched through the footage. Like I said before, we both did our best at trying to time manage our assignment, although we only had a limited amount of time to actually spend time together on finalizing the post-production process. We managed to plan out our dates for every Monday all the way to Friday, which is 5 days a week. We'll come in and continue on certain parts of the doco that needed working on. Because of that, we were only given 5 hours a day to pretty much use the computers at SAE. While Martina was doing the translation and subtitles for the film, I tried to arrange everything in the way that the director wanted it to be. Everything went smoothly once the translation was done. The last week before submission, we decided to send it through early. I think we both thought it was possible from what we had, but to be honest, I feel like I could have done better. I should have worked on it more while I still had the hard drive with me. I think I was just scared of making any changes that could have made a drastic difference to the documentary itself. I still could have asked Martina for some advice on what things I could improve on, but I froze up and kinda left it as it was. Especially since everything was already alright the way it was, I'm pretty sure it would have made it easier to view, since the subtitles and pretty much everything that was presented was done at a very fast pace. It was my fault that I didn't continue on the project, knowing that I could have made it easier for viewers to watch. SP603 Springbok Tour. A long tour home was the title of the short film based on the Springbok tour. The main protagonist of the project is shown to be leaving the police station while the father was seen picking him up and taking him home in the car. 1 or 2 minutes into the video, it doesn't necessarily show the reason for why the son was arrested in the first place until the radio transitions to the voice announcer. Just as the host was about to talk about the effects that the Springbok tour has had, the father immediately turns the radio off, therefore explaining the evidence of the son's arrest. As they arrive home, bits of dialogue between the two are exchanged. Afterwards, father and son exit the car as the film cuts to a black screen. During the course of this project, I was mainly involved in the post-production aspect. I used that time to put the film together in an all-nighter. Wasn't exactly sure what direction the film was heading towards, so my first draft was out of place. After a discussion with everyone in the group, I made minor changes into the edit. I made sure to correct any of the changes that I previously made and made sure the film worked towards the director's vision. I was just confused at first on what film we're trying to produce. Unfortunately, I forgot to render out the audio bits of the son tapping the helmet constantly, not realizing until the last minute. It was pretty disappointing that I didn't realize it sooner. I feel as if I either prioritized the wrong things during the post-production process, or I didn't watch the film to its entirety and forgot to remove the specific sound effects. I learned that it's important to always rewatch the film to its entirety, even though you've already watched it so many other times. CC600 Rogue. I don't really remember what I did for this course or what it was all about. All I know about was that the group I was working with had something to do with a drone being the main protagonist of the film. They were also sentient to an extent. What I remember from the film itself, the main drone in the film was being hunted down by another drone that happens to be the antagonist. There was a pursuit or a chase scene where both the drones could be seen trying to either escape or chase one another. I wasn't sure if there was a happy ending or so. The ending I remembered was that one of the drones was out of charge and needed a charger or battery to refill their systems. Since I only came into the project 2 or 1 weeks into the school before the project submission date was arriving, the only thing I really did was make a little VFX shot for the drone, as it had to appear that it was in some sort of evil-like laboratory that had a lot of screens in the room, or having an image of the protagonist drone in the middle of the room, saying the words target down below, as this was to show that the pursuer was going to be chasing after this specific piece of technology. I added in some smoke effects and a bit of glitch distortions to the drone image on the screen to make it more like it's being displayed on a TV or an actual monitor. I definitely think I could have improved the VFX shot, as it was only shown for a few seconds. I could have added a bit more originality to the piece, since I wasn't exactly sure on how to work on After Effects, especially since it was my first time actually using that program. I did figure out a few things here and there, although I wasn't able to blend it all together better than I had originally planned it out to be. I think it also could have come in the last week of the project submission, so I pretty much did everything I could, all in a 4-day process. Hyphy is the title of my video essay that discusses the Iceland films and how they are similar in many ways, expanding on the idea of world cinema by studying and presenting international films, recommended by Julia Reynolds. As the 2 movies I did my research based off of is Noia, the Albino, and Bouquet, as both films are made in Iceland, though produced at very different time periods. The genres of these 2 films are also quite different in a sense, as I was inspired by a YouTuber named Zensa to sort of structure my video essay in a similar way of his. What I remember doing on this project was the constant searching of media footage or images that I wanted to use for the assignment. Although I had quite a bit, I didn't really know if I had enough to sort of get my point across. I made sure to try and visit websites and get information from them. Mostly I depended on the similarization of the 2 movies, just from observing and taking down notes. I'll say that my time management on this assignment was a lot easier, mostly because I was able to do the majority of it at home, which helped out a lot when it came to doing all-nighters. One of the issues I had while doing this assignment was not knowing if my point made sense at all. A few times I've contemplated whether or not what I was researching really made sense to be important into the final project. I feel like I could have explained it better in a way that didn't sound too confusing. Another problem would have to be the phone audio itself. As I was recording on my budget phone in the bathroom, it had this really weird echo that made the piece more annoying to listen to. Pretty sure it was noticeable as well. I could have recorded the audio at school, but I think I just finished writing a script for me to read from, and I think I was on a bit of a time crunch if I remember. The time machine. Essentially, every time the scientist interacts with the time machine, the interaction between the sister diverges into a variety of ways that you can think of, somewhat showcasing an alternative timeline of different outcomes. Whether they'll be talking in a different language, maybe they'll be saying different bits of dialogue, maybe it'll be the way she interprets the dialogue, like the tone, the way she walks, the way she acts, the way she talks, you know. It's just like little tiny things you'll notice as it replays the same scene over and over again. She'll either be happy, maybe a little annoyed, mad, I guess. It's to show the different outcomes for every time the scientist interacts with his time machine that he has built. I will have to say that one of the strengths for this project was the editing process. Although if you actually look at the final output for this film, it's actually quite horrendous. It's really bad. But it was also one of the strong suits for the film. The reason why is because we only had one day to pretty much put the film together. Going in as early as we can into SAE at 10 o'clock, or I think it was somewhat earlier than that. We only had until 3 o'clock in the afternoon to submit our assignment. So with that in mind, we pretty much only had 5 hours to pretty much edit everything and try to make some sort of possible film. Yes, we were on a very strict time crunch on this project. The entire thing was shot in 4K, which made the process of transferring video footage, images, made the time length of the transferring so much longer. We got to work, spent as much time as we can without resting, and by the time 5 hours was up, we pretty much just had to submit what we pretty much had. The editing process between us two was going so well that I thought if we did this the beginning of the week, pretty sure we could have came up with something pretty amazing. Me and Tino had a really good teamwork ethic going on, especially for only 5 hours. For this work placement, I accumulated at least 42 hours. I was assigned to edit some scrapped music mixtape materials that my host supervisor wanted me to put together. We had a few discussions on what we wanted specifically on the edit, what sort of style he wanted, but he mostly let me just go free flow into the entirety of all things. I ended up doing some work with him as well. I unfortunately didn't sign another contract to legitimize it, which is why I have 27 plus 15 hours. I did, however, write down everything that we did during those times I was working with him on the project, especially it pretty much was the same amount of work I was doing for the first contract I signed. I would discuss with the supervisor every time I finished or started on another project. There was never a time that I was too confused to continue the contract, and I was able to put out some nice stuff for the client because of what he wanted from these little music video tapes that I did. I'll say one of the things I learned while working on these projects that took at least a week to finish was the communication, not only from my end, but also from my host supervisor. We're constantly keeping in contact with each other, and because of it, I was able to push through and make things I usually wouldn't normally use. It sort of made me force myself to use certain styles that I never thought I'd get the chance to experiment with. Because of it, it's opened my mind to a bunch of other possibilities that I couldn't think of beforehand. One of the things the client asked me to do, I wasn't able to execute it in the way that he wanted it to be done. I watched a few tutorials on how to do it, but it was a very complicated thing to follow overall. And the way I was supposed to integrate this effect seemed like something that I wasn't capable of doing at that time, which made me kind of sad, since the host supervisor was really passionate about the idea of having these paper cutout masking effects on the subjects in the music video, the idea of having these paper cutout masking effects on the subjects in the music video. I tried many times trying to copy the style just so I could somehow get used to how the style works and maybe implement it and improvise on it more as I got used to it, but I was just taking too long to do so I had to ask him if it was okay to leave that part out. I do regret not being able to complete what he really wanted, and hopefully next time I'll have a better understanding of the style itself that I want to achieve. The idea for this work placement was to create a highlight reel of one of my clients' streaming videos posted on YouTube. I was able to find a stream video that lasted at least 6 hours long. It took a while to cut and sort through all the clips to make a 10 to a 15-minute video out of it. I didn't really get much input from the host supervisor himself, but I managed to get his approval of the entire structure. I also got some ideas from some of my good mates that I know, just to make sure it was somewhat close to an actual highlight reel standard. He was happy with the video that I produced and practically asked me to work for him again, so that was a nice thing to hear, especially after I was trying so hard to figure out what he wanted out of this own video. One of the things that went pretty well in my opinion when it comes to transferable skills, I was able to adapt and create something even though I barely got any say from my supervisor. I met his expectations or even went past. I wasn't entirely sure if he was going to be interested in this project at first. He wanted to produce results rather than just vague communication. So I feel like I got to experiment a different side to handling clients' work to an extent. One of the issues that I recognized during the duration of the work placement was folder managing. I was constantly downloading on the web and trying to find things that would improve the content that was viewed within the highlight reel. I was mostly trying to look for audio bits from certain memes, maybe gaming audio parts that will work well with what was shown on the screen, which is why I had another person to sort of give their insight on the matter. It did help having that secondary input, as it gave me an idea on how I wanted to execute this video in general, and having a structure to work with made everything so much easier, so I wasn't constantly looking through the footage itself. Not really having an idea on what to do is honestly quite depressing. So yeah, that is my verbal and communicative version for my CC600 reflective journal by yours truly, Arthur Toa. Hope you enjoyed, and yeah.